Robot's History podcast, a podcast where we chart the development of this show and the British robot combat scene in general by looking at key teams and bots. I'm your host Luke, and with me today is Dan.
Hello.
And TG.
Hello.
And we are here today for this Hypnodisc Part 2.
Yes, at last.
Where we'll look at Hypnodisc's run from Series 5 onwards to its last season in Extreme 2.
Yeah. One of the many classic All-Stars that didn't return for Series 7.
Yeah, probably not a bad thing, unfortunately.
Well,
if last episode was all about how Hypnodisc rose to its
no pun intended. No pun intended.
Hey, rose to its status as probably if probably the robot was. This episode kind of shows how it tried to defend that status, how it tried to uphold that status as other bigger, badder spinners came into being.
Before we talk about the combat in general, to borrow Luke's favourite phrase, I'd like to talk about. We always talk about Razor clones, and to a lesser extent Chaos 2 clones, but I think the Hypnodisc clones actually were quite prevalent come this era. Series 5 is when we really started to see the horizontal flywheel imitators start to appear in quality. I mean, we had Disco Inferno in Series 4, that was a bit of a disaster, but you know, we've got Supernova now, we've got Disco Inferno's worked out the kinks. 13 Black, to an extent, you could argue, is inspired by it. And for the most part, they've actually been probably, of the three robots that really inspired all the designs, they were probably the most successful of range. Like Supernova and Disco Inferno both went on to do quite well in their own right.
With the CO2 powered flippers, like there are so many of them and they're so varied that it's hard to pin down which ones are specifically inspired by Chaos 2 and which ones are just doing it because it's a good weapon that's easy to get right. Hypnodisc clones are a lot more obviously inspired by Hypnodisc.
Yeah, like even something like Destructive Criticism or Bot Work from the International series, you can really see the inspiration.
Fluffy's kind of unique in that they went with a bar spinner, which I don't think anyone really did on either side of the pond, really.
Yeah, I think Fluffy was probably its own thing, but even still, was kind of like an evolution of it.
Yeah, last time we sort of covered Extreme 1 and the performance that Hypnodisc had in a not overwhelmingly positive light because it didn't have the best time there. Now we get to cover like the upshot of that, and that's its absolutely smashing Series 5 run.
Series 5 run, I reckon it's got to be one of the best. Like in terms of, take aside the first fight with Black Widow, which is just a bizarrely, I get why they put them against Black Widow. It's the same reason they put Chaos 2 up against Stormforce and Razor up against Big Nipper, although that did have a tiny bit of a scare in it. It's just like, we need something to show off. Like, what's the flattest box we can put against Razor? What's the most, tenuously linked robot we can put against Hypnodisc? What's the robot that's most likely to get maximum flips out of Chaos 2? So they said, you can have Black Widow. That's not going to win anything, but there's lots of stuff for you to smash up against it. So
yeah, I think Black Widow. It was like, let's see how many legs Hypno can break here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oh god, Black Widow was just like the definition of a shit walker as well.
Yeah.
God help them. They did try. They tried with that cotton web entanglement, but like most entanglement, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. So there's not a whole lot to say there. Just it chips away at it and then it breaks down. So there's not much to say about that fight.
The most exciting thing about it is the fact that Black Widow just stays on the flipper when it gets to fire it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luke, what were you about to say?
A quick word about the design. Yeah, a quick word about design. Hypno mostly was the same bot as Extreme, but it had the electrical bug fix, so no more crapping out against the nasty warriors of the world.
Thank you.
Yeah. And obviously with the order that in which things are filmed, it's not clear when some of this stuff was happening, but we can see just as we talking here that Hypno performs a lot better in Series 5 than it did in Extreme 1.
Yeah. So, now that Black Widow's aside, we can now talk about what I think is potentially the best run of robots. Like, the next 4 opponents that Hypnodisc beats are all high-quality robots that would reach the top 8 in their own right throughout their careers. And, like, Hypnodisc beats all 4 of them in a row without stopping, which I don't think you can compare to anybody else in Series 5. Like, everyone else in Series 5, like, Splinter and 3 Stegs are not quite on par for Bigger Brother, for example, and Razor versus Spawn Again, and Rick, and Widow's Revenge. It's like, Hypnodisc beats 4 genuine top-tier robots, and it does so without breaking a sweat in any of those 4 fights. Starting with the by far the best of the 4, which is Atomic 2.
This is really weird. Like, it's really weird that they put the seeds together at this point. It makes you wonder, like, was Bulldog Breed a seed at one point? Because, I mean, I can't think of any other explanation why they would do this.
Is there anything in the actual episode where, like, Philippa or Craig Charles calls Atomic the seed? Because honestly, the seeding could have been changed in post-production. Honestly, if it only appears in like
any.
Yeah, if it only appears in graphics and Jonathan Pierce commentary, and Stuart McDonald announcements, then really you could just assume that it was the other way around and they changed it, like, all in the editing room. Whereas, unless they actually say it to the Roboteers on the screen, that's my theory.
And even then, that's not entirely reliable. Lest we forget, Killatron apparently being a grand finalist in Series 1.
Yeah, I mean, Bulldog Breed's just as worthy of seeds. So.
I reckon it's more worthy. It beat Bigger Brother, whereas Atomic beat King B, who it was losing to until King B broke down. So
yeah.
Whereas Bulldog Breed genuinely did defeat Bigger Brother and actually played a bigger role in the first round, whereas Atomic really was carried through by Chaos 2 and probably should have lost in the first round if you want to get technical about who was immobilised first between it and Indefatigable. But we digress.
On the face of it, Atomic is a good design as a flipper to fight Hypno because it's a big plow front. I mean, that's gonna stand you a better chance than if you're just like a Chaos 2 style flipper panel. But Atomic's not exactly a robot famed for durability.
No, and unfortunately, those metal, arms that made up the flipper turned out to be hollow, which probably didn't help either.
No,
because you cut through them, and next thing you know, it cuts it off, clean off. For the second series in a row, Atomic's flipper is broken off.
Yeah.
Yeah, not good for Atomic.
No.
I mean, well, you kind of in this and the previous fight, you kind of see Hypno's still going in for those digs after the fight, but they're holding back to the extent they're not going to reduce you to a base plate.
No.
With some loosely attached motors.
What they did do, though, was stop Atomic from taking place in the Annihilator, which was to the detriment of literally everybody, because we ended up with, what did we end up with? Hippopotamus instead?
Fight, yeah.
It was them or one of the other ones that got subbed in, because that
Yeah, that was Hippopotamus. It was the fighting talk was in the Atomic one.
Oh yeah.
Because that ended up becoming a running trend with its next fight.
Yep.
Oh god.
Yeah, so Bulldog Breed, again, much the same. Bulldog Breed gets itself hamstrung and loses its link and breaks down and then chipped away and pitted in a surprisingly stylish pitting from Hypnodisc, who's not really known for pitting, but it does look pretty damn good.
Yeah, they started going for this later in their career, just like these kind of weird backwards pittings.
Well, you can't exactly push them in from the front.
It's a lot easier to push with the flat back end of their robot than it is with the disc.
Yeah, true.
Try pushing something with like a rotating front surface. Like, you will never get any traction there.
It getting Bulldog's removable link is just such a wonderful snipe as well.
Yeah.
It's not like it caves in the entire back of the robot and just rips out the link along with everything else. it just like gets just like the corner of the back end of it and just flicks the link out onto the floor.
It's kind of like a nice little vengeance for what Pussycat had done to it last series. Because it's almost the same spot on the robot. I think it's like that back left wheel. It was the same spot.
It was the back right on in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but you can complete a nice little triangle here. Bulldog Breed beats Pussycat, who beats Hypnodisc, who beats Bulldog Breed.
Yeah, it'll take a while for that last bit to connect though.
Yeah.
But, and I actually do like the post battle interview as well, because Craig asks them if they're beatable, and Dave says everybody's beatable, but Hypnodisc is performing very well, and it's just like it's a lot more humble than they could really afford to be. A lot more. Yeah, we're unstoppable with Hypnodisc at this point.
Robot Wars doesn't really do big egos though. Let's be real.
That's true. Yeah, they tend to not go down well.
That's the thing I always enjoyed, is the one who always like talk themselves up are people like Plunderbird. They're just like, we can't be beat. Look at this slicer dicer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Robot Wars is a show of pretty mild-mannered English backyard engineers.
I was going to say, England's full of mild-mannered backyard people, as opposed to America. So yeah.
And that's part of the problem that Extreme 2 has, in the it's trying to force them to be mean, and it only really lands if you take it.
Anyway, so that was the heat, nicely brisk. Some great moments in that heat, and now we're on to the semi-final, which is possibly the easiest semi-final run in the history of any grand finalist, but almost none.
It's over, and the amount of hits Hypnodisc has to land is less. You can count it on two hands, probably one.
You can count it on one hand in terms of what needs to win, and then you can add more to like the ones that it lands that it didn't need to.
Yeah,
but
and it's not something you'd expect as well, because obviously you've got Firestorm 3, which is a really solid machine, and will eventually be the overall third place of this series due to wackiness with melees and playoffs. But it's not something you expected to be defeated really easily by Hypnodisc. And then you've got Dominator 2, which is a quite heavily armoured axe robot, which is like what you would expect to be like the worst possible thing for Hypnodisc to face, and yet it sails through both of these fights with complete ease.
Yeah, so you wouldn't think it. Yeah, like you say, you wouldn't think it with Firestorm, but this fight is so short that literally everybody forgets that it happened, because you talk.
Yeah.
You know, no one's ever said this to me, but you get the impression when you talk to people, you get the impression that Firestorm has a 2-0 record over Hypnodisc when it's actually 0-1 the other direction. But yeah, Hypnodisc just like one hit's enough to kill Firestorm in one go, and then Firestorm just rolls into the CPZ basically conked out. And so it's a bit sad. It would have been nicer to see a longer fight, more in the vein of like VMAX or somebody else. Like, it says a lot when VMAX gave Hypnodisc a better fight than Firestorm 3 did.
I mean, it's a weird fight because Firestorm internals are an absolute mess. I mean, the Hypno hits, you can't even really see like particularly visible damage, and I don't think they didn't hit him on. I don't think they hit him like on the link, because the link's on the front. So yeah, it's a weird fight, that's for sure.
Yeah, you can see why it was just forgotten by everybody, because it's over so quickly. Like, I mean, what else is in it? You can see why they probably were able to give more time to some other fights in this melee, in this episode, because this one, we give Robot Wars a lot of flack for leaving stuff on the editing room floor, but, there's not a lot to carry on from here, because, it's over pretty much straight away.
Yeah, and we move on to what was probably before the reboot and the likes of Foxic versus MR Speed Squared, probably considered one of the worst fights ever. And I think the versus Dominator 2, of course, and the issue here is the producers are clearly hoping Hypnodisc is going to do a Splinter. But those days are long gone. The stakes are too high.
Yeah, like I put this one pretty much entirely on the House Roboteers for not moving Refbot in. or
Yeah.
producers not telling them to not move ref button.
They
Because
should have put Noel Sharkey's hand on that big button. You know, that he always used in the reboot, where he pressed the button. That's what we were missing.
yeah, because Dominator is dead. It's not coming back from that hit on its wheel guard, and yet they just leave it there.
I mean, yeah, and the thing is, this went to full time, so imagine what this was like watching it live.
It would have been so bad. And you know what? The fact that Hypnodisc's first fight with Firestorm was so short, I almost wonder whether they had to extend this one. Like, guys, we're not going to make a full episode at this rate. Like, we need something else. They're like, where's Bigger Brother and Come and Get Rix? Can they do another filler fight in this episode?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, negative points for Dominator 2. They straight up spin into Hypnodisc here. That's it. That big hit is totally on them. But yeah, after one of the easiest after one of the easiest semi-final runs, and after probably one of the worst fights ever, we move on to a particularly hard run, and probably, well, if you go by the Ultimate Countdown, the best fight ever.
It's certainly the most famous fight of all time because, you know...
Oh, absolutely.
Whatever you say about Carbide versus Eruption, there are 4 of those, whereas this is the only time these two fought one-on-one. And so it is definitely the most famous. It's the one that everyone talked about. When I first got back into Robot Wars in about 2009, all I had ever seen was Series 4 and half of Series 3, and this is the first thing that came up on YouTube, and I'm like, holy crap, what is this fight? This fight is bananas.
It is my favourite fight of the entire show.
It is a fight that we deserve. Like, the whole show was building towards a fight like this ever taking place. Like, something that is able to tank damage and yet come back to win. It's your David versus Goliath. And there have been David versus Goliath moments in Robot Wars before, where people have come back. I'm trying to think of some examples now. I shouldn't have started that sentence without having one locked and loaded.
Spikosaurus versus Dominator 2. That's like if Goliath just tripped over himself.
Yeah, Goliath backed up to, like, you know, limber up and then fell off a cliff. And then David's just like, yeah, nice. But David had been stood on before he did that. And so David just stands up.
It's like Wild Thing had Wild Thing versus Hypnodisc kind of had moments like that with getting some good rams in. Steg did. I mean, Behemoth versus Hypnodisc, that was kind of like Hypno wasn't in best health there, but here Bigger Brother just it takes brutal damage and turns it round.
Yeah. It's like if 101 had managed to beat Dominator 2, which is a shout out to my favourite fight, but it's that kind of mentality. Bigger Brother had that sort of Mike Franklin, like, well, you know what? They are going to destroy us, but let's just keep going until we can't anymore. And that was, Ian Watts said later, that was his plan. He's like, we just got to, tank the blows and wait for an opportunity to come up, and it did.
Well, while I was rewatching fights for this yesterday, I actually linked Nick's video of this fight to some friends of mine in another chat that don't watch Robot Wars, and it got quite the reaction from them. And I think that says a lot about just how much Bigger Brother just refuses to die, and at the same time, Hypnodisc just does this catastrophic damage to its outer shell. Like the flipper is broken beyond use. There are holes in the armor, mostly located on the back panel, but it's all crumpled and dented and buckled. And when you find out how many people just had to help and provide spare parts and assist with the repairs for it, just so that it could be ready for the next round, is quite amazing. And yet it keeps going, and as it's just starting to claw its way back into the fight, there is this moment where it just manages to get Hypnodisc into the pit, and it comes out of nowhere. It's one of the biggest upsets the show ever had, and it is a stellar moment.
Yeah, I love that one shot of Hypnodisc's rear end poking out of the pit and Bigger Brother like next to it, And Bigger Brother, like, you can't even tell what the front of Bigger Brother is. It are they facing Hypnodisc? Are they side along with Hypnodisc? I can't even tell what's the front of Bigger Brother anymore because the flipper is so mangled.
I think it's facing Hypnodisc, but the flipper has been like knocked sideways, like 90 degrees.
Yeah, literally. I'm looking at it now. Yeah, but that's one of the most famous images in Robot Wars. It's just that one shot of them because it just says everything. It's like, yeah, I'm out of the pit, but you're in the pit.
It's like a Rocky movie. Like
It
near
is
the
like
end,
a Rocky movie.
near the end, Hypno's kind of like unsteady. Like its disc is slowed down, and it's like the end. It's like Ivan Drago. Like
Yeah, or Victor
he's so
Drago
tough.
if you've seen Creed 2 and you're from that generation. You know, just a quick digression. I've got where I work, I've got some 18-year-old employees, and they called it the Creed series the other day, and I said no, it's the Rocky series. Just because the Creed series, it's like someone calling the Robot Wars. Oh yeah, that show with like TR2 and Ironside. I'm like, no, it's Hypnodisc and Razor and Chaos 2, and you will never convince me otherwise. But
So
anyway,
yes, after that hell of a run,
but just
Hypnodisc
quickly, one more
comes
thing
back up
about
against.
this fight. One more thing about this fight.
Oh yeah, sure.
What makes this narrative and what what Dan said, what makes it so appealing to Robot Wars fans all over? Carbide versus Eruption is a great fight in Series 10, asterisk, Grand Final, second asterisk.
It's a good fight, alright.
It's a great fight, but it's better because you know that Carbide has curb stomped it 3 times. This fight is good in isolation. You don't have to know anything about the show. And the things that appeal to it most are the fact that, Bigger Brother's got these cute little kids and, Ellie's crying and the cameraman's like, let's get that reaction shot. Like, stick the camera right in the little girl's face as she's crying about her robot.
Robot Wars loves crying kids.
Sociopathic. But then, like, I love when they're pitting and then, like, Dave and Derek, I can't remember, I think it's Dave Rose, is just doing, like, that slow clap. He's just like, that's, like, good on you guys. It's just a delight to watch from the editing side of things. Like, the things that they show are just a delight.
There's even a little bit where it's just like, I'm not sure if the producers are being entirely neutral in this fight, because when Bigger Brother rams Hypnodisc into the arena wall in the CPZ, Shunt just drives across the arena and starts attacking Bigger Brother.
Yeah.
On the offensive.
You know why? You know why that is? Because Bigger Brother accidentally activated Roadcast Robot.
Oh. Yes. That was a feature. At least they didn't get the Fog of War.
Yeah. Oh, imagine.
You gotta say, you gotta say
that pitting with the Fog of War. It would have ended up with Bigger Brother pitting themselves in the Fog of War.
One thing I do love about the Rose is it's like between them and Graham Bone for like just the best lose. The best lose is like the second they're in the pit, they're just like smiling, giving a thumbs up.
Yeah, they're like genuinely happy for the other side, because I've heard people say, like, Ian Watts basically publicised that Bigger Brother versus Hypnodisc went exactly according to plan, and some people said to me that kind of ruins it, because, like, it wasn't an upset for him. Like, just because he planned it doesn't mean that it was ever going to go according to plan. Like, the best plans go out the window as soon as the battle starts.
Yeah,
so,
no plan survives contact with the enemy.
That's the one I was trying to... That was the quote I was trying to think of.
I'm sure Napoleon had plans. It doesn't make him any less fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. So, kudos for Ian Watts for having a plan, because, there's been plenty of people who've gone into fights with Hypnodisc who didn't have a plan, and they just sort of died. Whereas, yeah, he had a plan, and he pulled it off, and that doesn't make it worse. In fact, that makes it better for me.
Yeah, it's not a luck-based victory. It's something. It's a clear strategy. Like you can tell it's a clear strategy from the moment that Bigger Brother starts the battle with its back panel facing Hypnodisc instead of its flipper. And like it's the entire point is to take advantage of that one weakness that a lot of spinners have, and that's the recoil impacting the internals of itself as much as it's damage to its opponent. And ultimately that does take its toll on Hypnodisc, and that plays heavily into the situation it faces in its next fight.
Yeah. honestly reckon. Can I just? I know we've talked about this a lot, but we managed to move fast through the heat. I reckon that this fight is the reason that Hypnodisc versus Behemoth is not remembered nearly as much. Because I
No.
reckon that this has just taken all the praise and no one remembers Behemoth from it.
Well, plus Behemoth's an extreme fight.
It's an extreme
they always
fight,
get
and it then
overshadowed.
loses the next fight, and it's in round one of a side tournament. Whereas this is like
Yeah.
deciding who goes into the top two, and Hypnodisc, like who arguably was the best robot in Series 4, but ultimately didn't make the grand final, is here saying, right, well, I'm going to come back and get it again, and they look like they're getting it, and then they miss out. Like the stakes are higher, but I also think the strategy part of it. Behemoth clearly had a plan. Bigger Brother had a plan. You know who didn't have a plan? Nasty Warrior. And that's why that's a crap fight.
But
anyway.
does that mean that Nasty Warrior is the best robot to defeat him?
Anyway, I'm finally done. I know I keep saying let's
Yeah.
a
With
little
this
bit more,
one,
just a
with this
bit
one,
more.
we'll have anything to say in Bigger Brother.
If you want to hear more about this fight, you'll have to wait for our episode on Bigger Brother, or right now go and listen to the Ultimate Countdown podcast, where TG and Toast and Nick will regale you with even more praise for this fight. So
Well, I will. They'll talk about how it should have been Carbide versus Eruption, but I will say why it's good.
yeah. So
Anyway.
then we have this fight between Hypnodisc and Firestorm, and honestly, I actually really like this fight on a weird level, because it's just like both of these robots at this point are on their last legs, and they still go out there just like Firestorm was held together with tape and hope.
It had no flipper.
Hypnodisc has battered its own internals to the point of not being able to get quite as much damage as it normally would be able to.
Well,
And
you say that.
I mean, it is doing a fair bit of damage to Firestorm, but mostly though it's breaking bits of Firestorm that are already falling apart.
It does
Well,
more
in
visible
Hypno's
damage in this
defense-
fight than it did in the previous.
Yeah, it does
that's
put
true.
a nice gash in Firestorm's side. Yeah. I think what elevates this fight is that it's short, yeah, but it's breakneck. It's at a breakneck pace. Both of these robots just go hell for leather, and then it ends in like a minute. Which that's how you want a short fight to end, I guess.
Yeah, the fact that both of them are so clearly not at 100% anymore, probably not even really at 50%.
No.
Yet they both still give it their absolute all, and it is this absolute nail biter of a fight all the way through. It gives it a level that watching two broken robots try and kill each other normally wouldn't have.
Oh man, remember when we used to have? Remember in the reboot when we had broken robots trying to kill each other?
Oh,
Yeah,
It's
it was,
like-
and it ruined the series.
Yeah, it was like Iron Ore versus Androme, which I don't think is that bad, but most of the time it's like, ugh.
I was thinking like the deep into round robin kind of series 8 and 9.
Yeah.
or just
When
like,
we had dead spinners trying to fight
Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Speed
Or
Squared versus
anything,
anything.
anything
heavy
after,
metal.
anything after the first round.
anything
Anything
except
after heavy metal.
of course. Yes.
Yeah, the heavy metal fight's decent.
Yeah.
And what's notable is this is one of Robot War's few, if only, I think, dual immobilization. They both just smash into the pit, and unfortunately for Hypnodisc, Firestorm can take a smashing better than they can, because
At
this...
least at
They've
this
got
point.
extra armor now, so
Yeah, that
it-
polycarb saved them.
Yeah,
this...
it's a thin layer of polycarb that's so thin that it's not really discoloring the armor underneath that much.
Well, yeah, but yeah, that's the reason probably why that's the reason why I think Hypno in the Annihilator is so dismal. That final impact just ruins
yeah,
the lot.
and you know why? Because their disc is at full speed when they hit the pit, and that
Yeah.
cannot have been good for it.
No. We saw how much damage it took from having Shunt's axe hit the disc while it was spinning up. let alone from the whole weight of the robot smashing into the pit and Firestorm falling on top of it for good measure. So,
Yeah.
And it's like
It's
they hit the pit at almost the exact same time. It's not like Heavy Metal versus Mr. Speed Squared where there's a clear order. They hit at such a high speed that literally, I mean, you could argue Firestorm was the aggressor and probably, you could make an argument, but I actually think it's better that they're just like, great, you guys both ended up in the pit at the exact same time. Let's call it a draw and go for a rematch.
yeah, and then unfortunately, Hypnodisc is unable to repair itself in time, and that's
Yeah.
the end.
Yeah,
yeah.
you've got to wonder what happened. Like that interview with Craig Charles, that can't possibly have just been them walking out of the booth. That has to have been shot like after they'd pulled them out of the pit and inspected the robots.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
probably.
mean, because otherwise, how would they know?
How would they know?
There's no way they'd know. Yeah, there's no way they would know just from the immediately after that happened. Like, oh yeah, our robot's dead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was probably reshot.
It's like I almost wonder how much time was given though, because like you can't see anything in the background that would indicate where everybody is. Like I'd love if you could see what's in the arena behind them as they're shooting it, because
It's just Eric Foxwell just like wandering about.
yeah.
they're just like Hypnodisc just sitting there with like his body work off.
Because like Craig Charles's reaction is too prepared, and like Derek Rose is not a great actor in like going, oh no, we're gonna have to forfeit, and then
Yeah.
Craig Charles has like got the post result thing. You almost wonder whether it was just like a, you know what, they're just like, let's just give it to Firestorm, like let's not bother with the rematch.
Yeah,
I don't know. Who knows? Who knows?
Rose are just like, you know what, we're not putting it back out there.
Yeah, I mean, the one more thing that I do love about this fight is just the before and after shots of Firestorm. Just like the
I
absolute,
know.
just what some of these robots go through, and like that's damage from two goes with Hypnodisc, Ray,
Pussycat and Razor, yeah.
yeah.
And that's in 4 fights. That's and Fluffy as well. So in 5 fights, it's
No,
fought...
Fluffy, did it fight? It didn't fight Fluffy.
Oh, sorry, that's Pussycat. Who am I thinking of? Oh, sorry, Firestorm. So in 4 fights, it's fought Razor, Pussycat, and Hypnodisc twice. That's insane. Like, that's unheard of.
Yeah,
Makes Hypno's run to the grand final look practically nice.
Yeah, I know. That's right. Although Firestorm does lose one of those fights, and no, Firestorm does lose 2 of those fights, whereas Hypnodisc wins all 4 of the ones that we were discussing. Yeah. Anyway, so that's it for a very valiant Series 5.
yeah. I think this was almost certainly Hypnodisc's last chance to win the title.
Yeah, I think pretty conclusively. Yeah. Well, Hypnodisc did of course return for Series 6, and they made some changes. Yeah, there's quite the difference between this and the Series 5 version. Why don't you take us through it, Dan?
Well, the difference with Hypnodisc at this juncture is it's largely a very similar design, of course, but it has the full row of spikes added back on. It's got a new disc as well, which it's probably the best looking disc, if not the most effective, because it's unfortunately the shaping of the teeth on this one doesn't lend itself quite as well to getting the good bites. They're almost triangular, and it creates this sort of ramp up to the bitey bit of the tooth, which didn't do Hypnodisc any favors, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And plus 2 teeth are generally worse than 1 when it comes to spinners.
Yeah, but it's got the standard 100 kilogram weight. It's seeded 4th, which I'd say is fair. It was 4th place by default. I wouldn't rate its chances of victory in this series as highly as I would rate Bigger Brothers. Probably about equal with Firestorm, but It's got two 750-watt electric motors in it, and its dimensions are basically the same. It's still about a meter and a half long, and and
All that jazz.
yeah, yeah, and it still has its not insignificant ground clearance.
Yeah, I think in contrast to their like dazzling Series 5 run, their Series 6 run is one of just the most like it's just like a dull thud. It's like a it's
Yeah, like
so unspectacular.
it's not bad, but it doesn't quite have the same aura as its previous two. I mean, obviously, having a more exciting run than its Series 4 run is difficult, and having a higher quality run than its Series 5 one is similarly hard. But it just like its first fight is they put it in with a robot from Team Monad, Granny's Revenge 2, and a plastic full body drum. Like,
Yeah. Talk about an opportunity fight, honestly.
yeah, like they are clearly just like I'm not sure why you would put three robots that you're expecting Hypnodisc to completely destroy in the melee with Hypnodisc, because two robots have to go through.
Yeah.
Like, are you trying to create a Series 9 situation here, Mentor? Because
Yeah, I know.
you've got the highest chance of getting. I mean, it doesn't end up going that way, but it very easily could have.
Yeah, Hypno could have had a fine time just ripping everything here apart, but that maybe because there's three of them to rip apart, there's just not enough time.
Yeah, and in fact, Barbarous 2 almost steals its thunder.
Yeah, it is stealing its thunder for the first minute or so until Hypno just kind of comes in and kills it in one.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's made of plastic, as Jonathan will go on to mock every time Barbarous appears.
Yeah.
I do love this fight though, because it's just such an unexpected delight that Barbarous ends up being the hero of the fight. Like, it's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm here to be sacrificial. Well, you know what? I'm going to do whatever I want, and I'm going to like almost oota Granny's Revenge too, just by being a full-body drum spinner.
I mean, well, Granny's Revenge 2 is a particularly, it's got a fairly high centre of gravity.
Yeah, still a delight though.
Yeah.
And yeah, then Hypnodisc basically comes in and goes, "Oh crap!" It's like this fight almost makes me disappointed in Hypnodisc, because it's just like they're like expecting just to coast through, and they're like, "Oh crap, Barbarous is taking all the fun, right? Well, I better come in and kill everybody." And it's almost like it's almost cynical, and I'm just like, "Oh, no, no Predator versus Razorblade versus Hypnodisc here."
Yeah, the last minute or so is like Hypnodisc trying to like make up for lost time. It's like
exactly
it's having to go
right.
at everyone.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, and it's a disappointment really, but yeah, good on Barbarous, and then we get a rematch versus Bulldog Breed, which is a bit interesting as well, because it's such an anomaly in Hypnodisc Series 6 campaign, in that Hypnodisc Series 6 campaign feels like it's just like crap, because it loses both fights in the semis, it beats Barbarous twice, and then you got this fight, which is genuinely, a good opponent, and he just beats them quite easily. But you almost dismiss it, and it feels out of place in this Series 6 campaign.
But
Yeah.
it is nice to have that rematch, though. Because,
Not for Bulldog Breed, it's not, but
not
still.
for Bulldog Breed, obviously, but it's nice to have a rematch between two robots that fought the last series. That, like, normally when it comes to the possibility of rematches, it's always going to be between the top tier competitors. So there's like this underlying factor of just like the producers probably don't want these two top tier robots that fought last series to meet until like at least round two of the semi-finals, probably the final itself. But then when you've got like Hypnodisc and Bulldog Breed, like they're not expecting as much from Bulldog Breed, so yeah, they can meet in the heat.
And Bulldog Breed's had like two heat finals in a row. They're like, let's give Cat 3, or Barbarous a chance to get, the job done.
Yeah,
Now, now the usual consensus is that Hypno like had a serious downgrade in spinner power, and I think this is one of the fights kind of cited like, oh look, point out the difference between Hypno tearing into Bulldog in Series 5 and Bulldog mostly, well, Bulldog not taking as much visible damage in Series 6, but Bulldog, even though Bulldog wasn't very good in fighting spinners in that it never survived them. I mean, it dies here. It does less here than it did in Series 5, but Bulldog's frame held up fairly well.
Yeah, I mean the difference is that like Hypnodisc got a really good kill on Bulldog in Series 5, but it punches through some polycarb and rips out the removable link. In this case, that doesn't happen, and Hypnodisc just has to beat it to death over the course of the battle.
Yeah, there is a really nice big gouge in it, but it's not like Series 6 is when the armor started really being big boy armor. Like people would really tank. Bulldog breed is quite tanked up between 5 and 6. And it really says more about Bulldog breed than about Hypnodisc, really.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because I mean, like even in CV7, Exterminator wails on that frame for like a whole fight, and it's still mostly together. So Bulldog was just well built.
Armor starts ramping up around this point because like even when like even back as in like Series 4 and 5, people were fearful of Hypnodisc, but I imagine that quite a few people were like, there's a low chance of us actually meeting it because there's a good chance of us getting knocked out before we even get close to fighting Hypnodisc, and like the Hypnodisc clones were all a bit shit. But then you get after Series 5, now you've got fluffies around. Disco Inferno is not crap anymore.
Supernova.
Supernova's around. S3 from a it's still a spinner. I mean, it's a vertical, but the spinners are starting to creep into
259.
Yeah, well, 259
goes on.
wasn't until Series 6, but yeah.
Oh, I thought we were talking about Series 6. My mistake.
Well, it is like Series 5 is like what people building for Series 6 have to go on. And as these spinning weapons are starting to show up, and like it's more than just this one outlier that you've got a comparatively low chance of ever meeting that you have to worry about in terms of spinners now. And so it makes a lot more sense to armor up at this juncture.
Yeah.
That, of course, doesn't bode well for Hypnodisc because, like, it has a new disc. It's got this 20-kilogram disc, but at the same time, it hasn't really advanced a whole lot aside from adding the Streamhack. Like they've upgraded its internals, but it's still pretty much the same design that showed up in Series 3.
Yeah, we better move quickly along because we're up to the 45-minute mark and we've still got a bit to talk about. So the heat final with Barbarous is not fun because there's one collision made and Barbarous conks out, and I honestly don't even think Hypnodisc hits it. I think Barbarous glances on Hypnodisc's body frame and kills itself. Honestly, I'm watching it right now, and it's very, very sad. But good on Barbarous for making the heat final because you can't say they didn't deserve it. They certainly did a bloody good job. Probably a lot more so than Razorblade and even Bulldog Breed 3 did.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're probably the most deserving of the heat finalists to go up against Hypnodisc. But sadly, that one's over.
It's not often you have to fight two All-Stars in a row, so well done.
Yeah, Cat 3.
Yeah, Cat 3 is pushing it, but yeah,
technically an All-Star.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah, so...
Cat 3's won more All-Stars fights than Hypnodisc has. Honestly, it has.
That's unfortunately very true.
Yeah. Anyway,
we'll get to that in Extreme 2 All Stars, but
yeah, we've just been talking about how like robots were starting to wise up and armor up, and the next robot Hypno would face, who would end Hypno's run of true dominance. They took it one step further and adopted the principle of, they pretty much were the first in Robot Wars to realise how you beat a spinner, which is you strap a big block of metal on the front and drive into it.
No, I refuse to believe that was a conscious decision towards fighting Hypnodisc because they used the wedge pretty much constantly.
And also, they wanted to use an anti-spinner weapon, like they had an anti-spinner just like they did with the anti-razor, but unlike the anti-razor one, the anti-Hypnodisc one was not allowed because apparently Hypnodisc raised a complaint, and ultimately I don't think anybody was worse off for not seeing that anti-Hypnodisc
It was like a
weapon,
big
'cause
ring of. It was a big ring of tires, wasn't it?
I imagine it was probably similar to Sky from the Swarm, would have been that kind of weapon.
Maybe, and that and like a big scale version of anything from the Swarm is the last thing we need.
Yeah.
But like there is the point of like, this is the epitome of the everybody's bulked up now, but at the same time, Tornado was doing that anyway. It's a Rambot. It's a brick with a something that moderately counts as a weapon strapped to the front of it.
Fair dues. I imagine after fights like where they're still kind of struggling against Chaos 2 despite being outweighing it so much. Probably got the idea of let's minimize our ground clearance a bit, lads.
Yeah. I mean, it's a standard Tornado fight.
Oh, come on.
And the most notable thing about this fight is who the opponent is. Because ultimately, in terms of what actually happens in the fight, it's interchangeable with pretty much any of Tornado's fights from Extreme 1 that aren't against Razor or King B. Like, and
Yeah, like you see, it's the same strategy they had against Pussycat, for example.
yeah,
There's only so many set strategies you can have as Tornado.
yeah. I don't begrudge Tornado, but I never remember its fights.
Yeah.
Unless it's something amazingly memorable, like the title fight for this very series, or memorable for the wrong reasons, like its victory over Chaos 2 and Extreme 1, where it has lost that fight. But anyway,
I mean, poor Hypno really never stood a chance because
No.
Tornado is far too persistent a thing, and Andrew Marchant is way too good a driver.
Because
in this entire fight, which goes a distance, I counted Hypnodisc manages 1 hit on their side.
Yeah, he is Andrew is a fantastic driver, and this fight goes pretty much exactly the way he would want it to, and the Rose Boys can't get a look in, which is incredible considering that they are simultaneously really good drivers.
Yeah, and I gotta say on that point, I'm glad you say that, because I reckon Dave Rose is a really, really good driver, but I also think his machine is one of the hardest to drive, because it's very difficult. It's very easy to drive something like Chaos 2 or Tornado, I imagine, whereas Hypnodisc, like a third of its weight is a gyroscopic spinning disc, and you've only got really little tires, so that thing must be a pain in the ass to drive. Whereas, the other two, you're just driving them in a straight line, and then you've got a separate mechanism for the weapon. It's just like activate weapon. Whereas Hypnodisc, you've got to actually incorporate the weapon into driving it. So
Yeah.
The testament I find to how good they are at driving Hypnodisc is the fact that I needed to be told that they couldn't power the weapon and drive at the same time in Series 3.
yeah,
Like you don't notice that it isn't spinning the weapon up and driving under its own power at the same time unless it is specifically pointed out to you, and that's their first series.
Yeah, I mean, something like Hypnodisc, the driving's more likely to be underrated. It's not like with a flipper or a crusher where you have to be there is more skill involved in and it's more obvious skill. Something like Hypnodisc or Carbide, like when all people see is that you're driving into the opponent and doing damage, they'll be more likely to just kind of underrate you and they just need to drive in a straight line.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, Hypnodisc takes a lot more, in my opinion, than most modern spinners do, because like as we were saying with in this conversation, we were talking before we did this episode, and Toast brought up this point that just like Hypnodisc's disc, for as large as it is, doesn't extend very far beyond the robot's own dimensions, and it only covers the front half of the robot. Whereas with modern spinners, like you look at Carbide and just like there is the arc of its basic death zone on its bar is like a full like 2/3 of the robot's circumference, you cannot drive into without getting shattered across the whole arena floor. Like all Carbide needs to do is just keep turning to keep the bar towards the, which Hypnodisc really can't do as easily, and yet it does so well. Like even here, like the worst performance Hypnodisc ever puts in the main series is round 1 semi-finals, which is still a lot better than the vast majority of the competition.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Like Hypnodisc versus Splinter is just like one of its worst performances.
I mean, you were mentioning other spinners. I think like for all people like to talk down Hypno's reliability. If this was Fluffy or Supernova Disco Inferno, would their disc still be moving at the end of this fight? No, they would be dead. They would be dead on the floor smoking.
Yeah.
If
Anyway,
Hypno seems, if Hypno seems less reliable, it's just it's never had to face anything like this.
Yeah, I mean it goes the distance. Even going up against Tornado here, like compared to like it visibly starting to flag at the end of some of its other attrition fights, like it gets worn down by Behemoth and by Bigger Brother, but it's still going at the end of its fight with Tornado.
Which so few others can say in Series 6. Like Firestorm can't say that. Sadly, Dominator 2 can't say that because they fall in the pit. But we've got to move along. I think we go from what is probably the worst Hypnodisc fight of all time, which is the Losers Melee. This fight is so bad. There is almost nothing. There's nothing to say about it. It's not even Hypnodisc's lack of contribution. The fight itself is bad.
Well, Spawn again gets to be impressive, which is very rare in this series.
I think you're thinking of the wrong one. You're thinking of All Stars. This fight, Spawn again barely does anything either. Like,
it gets a flip on Big Brother. That's more than you can say what it did for most of its fights.
It does, but it's basically immobilized when it makes that flip. That's all.
Yeah,
yeah. It's Series 6 Spawn again. Like, and the fact that this is something that Luke is talking up as positive compared to the rest of its run is very telling with Series 6 Spawn again.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a shit show of a fight. It's like Hypnodisc breaks down very early on. It unfortunately does not get vengeance on Bigger Brother. Spawn again pretty much is responsible for a lot of it because it does a lot of the early pressure on Hypnodisc. And then, a couple of blows from Bigger Brother and it makes some solid impacts with the wall, and then that's pretty much it for Hypnodisc after that. And then the fight doesn't get any better with them gone either, because...
No, and it's a shame because like after the last fight between them, and like the overhaul that Bigger Brother received, because fairly obviously it needed to be rebuilt after Series 5. And the rebuild that it got armored it up against spinners because of the Hypnodisc fight, basically. But at the same time, sacrificed top armor, which directly contributed to its losses to Dominator 2 and Terahertz. Like, the sacrifices that Bigger Brother makes to be better against Hypnodisc, and when they actually fight again, Hypnodisc dies far too early, probably because of overhanging damage from its previous encounter with Tornado. It's just such a letdown for what in another life could have been a good rematch between two robots that had one of the show's best battles. But then I suppose at the same time, the fact that there wasn't a true rematch probably helps the Series 5 clash stand out as the amazing fight that it is. I think if there had been a rematch, perhaps it wouldn't be regarded quite as well.
Yeah, but this fight, it's just garbage. Like, Hypnodisc knocks itself out, and like Dave Rose's expression in Series 5 when he loses, he's like clapping. In Series 6 when he gets eliminated, he's just like, oh, god damn it. Like, how frustrating. You go from being eliminated in what is the best pitting, possibly the most famous loss of all time, to literally knocking into a wall and breaking down. It's just very sad, really.
It is. It is. Yeah.
So there's not much else you can say about the the losers melee. All right, well, last two fights in Hypnodisc's career are both fairly sad for Hypnodisc. The All Stars of Extreme 2, as we foreshadowed, features Hypnodisc chalking up less wins in All Stars tournaments than Cat 3 does. Where it draws again, Spawn again, and this time another Series 5 Vengeance match, Dominator 2, whereas this time Vengeance is achieved, but it's on Hypnodisc.
One thing I want to note that's like a cruel joke. They moved the drive motor under the disc for extra reliability.
Oh.
Look, this is a better fight. It's a better fight.
Yeah, that's right.
They actually joke about changes because you know, they have this whole thing with moving the disc, and then the only other change they say is that Derek's had a haircut, which is like, that by itself is funnier than 90% of Extreme 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this is Hypno's unreliable in this fight to the extent we've never seen it die in the first fight of a tournament, but it's bloody crashing about a lot.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't the same Spawn again as it's.
Oh no! This is good Spawn again.
Yeah, like this is the hints of a Spawn again that was better, and unfortunately never quite got to deliver on that.
Yeah.
Better.
They get some really nice. Yeah, they get some really nice flips on Hypnodisc here, and it's really props to Spawn again because name the robots that have flipped Hypnodisc while it was spinning, like Atomic and Spawn again.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that's it. Like Firestorm never did it. Chaos 2 only did it after it stopped the disc. Bulldog Breed never achieved it.
Hypno's effectively double teamed here, but it's double teamed by like a very good Spawn again and a Dominator 2 who we know is just incredibly well armored. So it's not really it's no point against it that it loses here.
You kind of expect Hypnodisc to get double teamed, don't you? Like it's Hypnodisc getting double teamed in a fight with more than one robot, with more than one opponent in it is kind of what you almost expect because it is the threat. Like even more so than Chaos 2 and Razor ever could claim to be. It was the robot that everybody else was afraid of.
Yeah. And it wasn't even like, we're going to lose the fight. It was if we don't take Hypnodisc out, we might win, but we might take damage. Like, look at Ming 3 and Really Big Cheese.
Like, and even then, it's just like there's three levels. There's obviously there's the obvious we're gonna lose. It's fucking Hypnodisc. There's the whole we might win, but our robot could be so damaged that it may as well have lost, like the Pyrrhic victory route. But then there's also the possibility that it's just like not only are we going to lose, but we're going to be taking our robot home in a black bag.
Yeah.
And those days were long over for Hypnodisc by that point. But I don't think anybody ever really forgot those fights in Series 3 and 4 where it just utterly destroyed everything that was put in front of it.
And even people like Mark Lambert, who would go on to beat Hypnodisc in quite a skillful and a little bit lucky run in the next fight. Even he was like they still said we're all still afraid of Hypnodisc. Like you can't not be afraid of Hypnodisc. Like underestimate them at your own peril.
Yeah,
they've lost a couple of fights now.
Their next fight in the challenge belt, like, it's just a fight it's a fight I wish had never happened. At least the All Stars saw them like crashing about double teamed. Danton Kia here dismisses Hypno as easily as Hypno would dismiss the Predator or something.
Yeah,
but it's
for a robot that was long mocked as being like poorly armored and unreliable for its shoddy performance against S3. Danton Kia just wipes the floor with Hypnodisc here in a way that you really don't expect. It just straight in over the wall.
Yeah. it is a bit sad. I am torn because aesthetically it is one of the nicest looking Utas ever, but yeah, at the same time, it's one of my favorite robots, and Hypnodisc barely gets to contribute to the fight. So, like, it gets one hit on Smidsy, and that's really it.
And that's one of the things I find fascinating about this, because like, obviously at this point, most of us have, I think all of us, in fact, have an extensive history with fantasy tournaments. And if you put this matchup in front of us, Dantom Kia versus Hypnodisc versus Sir Chromalot versus Smidsy, obviously Dantom Kia and Hypnodisc are going through.
Yeah.
Then you factor in the psychology of, no, hang on a minute, what's everybody thinking here? And it turns out that Mike Lambert's thinking that Hypnodisc absolutely has to go out of the arena now.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think necessarily that this fight diminishes Hypnodisc at all. Like, I don't think it's the same way Chaos 2 versus Dantom Kia. It's like, you know, they found the big threat and they were a combination of skillful and lucky. Like, no one's ever been able to flip Hypnodisc up against the wall like that.
It wouldn't diminish it if it wasn't their last fight.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. On a quick note, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we've still got quite a bit to cover, but obviously Hypnodisc skipped CV7 because they've decided they take some time out to do some interior decorating.
Yeah, and
in the hope
they had a new arrival in the family as well, which is very nice.
Yeah.
They were probably thinking that there was going to be a Series 8 in 2004.
Yeah. Now, I don't know which heat it would have gone in. Perhaps Dantom Kia's a spawn against. Where do you think it would have? How do you think it would have done in either of those?
I think it would have easily won Sport against Heat, considering Raging Nightmare's armor was so soft. It was like cheddar cheese. It was like, yeah, sure, if you tapped it, it would be solid, but you get a knife and you'll cut through it.
Yeah, which would have thrown it against Tornado again, but they might have changed the heat around. They might have changed the matchup around.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have put Hypnodisc, which was, let's be real, quite a few people's in the production team's obvious favourite up against the reigning champion.
Well, I just don't think they'd go for another. Yeah. They'd do a rematch like that.
No, I don't think they would either.
Dantom Kia's one is more interesting because it's
IG88.
Yeah, because the thing is, a good IG88 hit in the right place would write off the Hypnodisc.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, IG88 isn't the fastest.
Yeah.
Nor has it got the maneuverability of somebody like Dominator 2 or Dantom Kia.
And I think Hypnodisc probably could get the better of it.
Yeah, a good side on hit could take out the wheels of IG88.
Yeah.
And don't forget Scorpion as well. You've got to get through Scorpion first.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think that Scorpion's disc does not look particularly. I think Hypno can have that pretty easily.
I wouldn't say easily, but I think that it would be a factor as well. What I'll say is I don't know how Hypnodisc would do in Heat C, but I feel very confident that it would win Heat N.
Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing though is that when you look back at it, Hypnodisc doesn't really fight something else that you would consider the norm for a competent spinner. Like, it fights Pussycat, which is a spinner, but it's far from a standard design. And it fights Barbarous, which is yes, it's a full-body drum, but it's also made of plastic, which doesn't lend itself well to going for spinner-on-spinner clashes.
Big spinner clashes weren't really a thing in Classic. Like, the closest I can think to is 259 Fluffy.
Yeah,
and also Fluffy Pussycat, if you want to call that a big spinner.
Well,
what about Fluffy Corkscrew?
Yeah, arguably.
I guess. Typhoon 2 Exterminator, if you want.
IG88 Scorpion.
Okay, maybe it happened more, but not. Okay, maybe not verticals versus verticals.
But yeah, they're not. Basically, what you're saying is they're not Pulsar Supernova.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not to the extent that these robots rev up, crash into each other, and then both of them are on the opposite are now impacting the walls.
Yeah, Big Nipper Aftershock kind of way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, quick aside, just just in case they did decide to really nerf Hypnodisc and call it the 7th seed, how would you reckon it would go in Gravity's heat?
I can see. I think. I think Gravity will just go. I think Gravity will. It won't mess around. It will go right under and just chuck it out.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Gravity's not
Gravity's
gonna-
armor is like plastic. I just don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think like if Gravity gets that box rush, and then goes for the flip, it'll take Hypnodisc out immediately because why mess around against Hypnodisc? But
Yeah.
against Gravity, if it avoids that box rush charge, then and manages to get a side-on hit, then it's got a good chance of crippling Gravity fairly quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue that Gravity managed to nerf 13 Black pretty easily, but 13 Black's, because it's got symmetrical, it's got that big middle space, whereas Hypnodisc, as we saw against Bulldog Breed, you flip Hypnodisc from the back, the disc gyros and like keeps the disc pointing down, whereas 13 Black, it's actually perfectly weighted, so it's so easily to flip around.
Yeah.
Not to mention, no matter what people like to think, 13 Black did not have the power of 2 Hypnodiscs.
No, it could have had similar power, but it was split between 2 discs. And while that was often good enough in classic Robot Wars, like 13 Black is not a bad robot. It certainly isn't going to be as effective as one single 20-kilogram disc that has all of the power.
Yeah. But yeah, between a box rush Gravity and an awkwardly streamlined Lightning, I think it would be. I think it probably would be able to make the heat final, but I just don't know. It would depend so much on Gravity.
Now, just before we end out here, there is one thing we haven't brought up yet, and one thing that I think will be a good way to end the episode. Really, the dream matchup that never happened. The dream matchup that Big Brother versus Hypnodisc. I guess you could say robbed us off, but that's quite a reward on its own. Of course, Hypnodisc versus Razor. Now, how do we think? I think when discussing this, it's best to go series by series because our opinions will differ according to when it happens.
Yeah, because Razor and Hypnodisc, their quality goes up and down relative to each other and to the series as the years go on.
Yeah, and so does their reliability as well. That's also got to be taken into account.
Much more in Razor's case, to be fair. So, Series 3.
Series 3, I will always say Hypnodisc. I know people say Razor, but for me, I just think, nah, Hypnodisc's at the peak. Razor had issues with its reliability. I know that it fixed them by the time of the World Championship, but we're not talking about it fighting in the World Championship. We're talking about it fighting in the UK series. And for me, I'm just like, nope, there's reliability issues there. And Hypnodisc, early on in its run, and even at the end of its run, when it's fighting Stegosaurus, it's still able to chomp through stuff. So I would say Hypnodisc.
That's fair.
Even if Razor fixed that particular issue, it didn't take any big hits quite like Hypnodisc can deal out. So
no, exactly.
The thing with Razor Hypnodisc fights is what they often come down to isn't the matter of can Razor take the hits, it's who is going to get the first hit. And in this case, I do lean in favour of Razor, but I do at the same time, I do think that TG's logic is very much sound. I think World Championships, Razor definitely has it. In series, it's a lot more mixed because there's a good chance that Razor's going to high center itself for no readily apparent reason before the fight's over, and I would come down on the side of Razor in terms of if there's anybody who can punish the issues that Hypnodisc has with driving and weapon power in this series, it is going to be Ian Lewis and Simon Scott, because they are much like the Rose Boys, one of those underrated, amazing drivers.
I don't think anyone underrates Ian Lewis.
No, not anymore. Maybe
I think they from a fandom perspective, no, nobody does anymore. But from a more general audience perspective, he doesn't get quite the same praise that Kim Davies and Ian Watts and
Grand
and,
Bone.
all of that get,
Yeah. Luke, what's yours?
Well, I go with Hypnodisc. I don't trust.
You're famously
I don't-
non-committal, but let's hear what your opinion is.
Hey, I said it. No, I Hypnodisc because Razor. I don't trust Razor to take hits. Not in Series 3.
Yeah. And also, just take into account, this is Hypnodisc's debut series as well. So, like, people don't... Razor's got a reputation by now. Hypnodisc doesn't. And I think that might also be a factor at play.
Yeah. You can't argue the Razor team won't be forewarned, though, because they did do their own fair bit of scouting. Like, you probably know Hypnodisc fairly well by the time they even encountered each other.
Yeah. It's so hard. The thing that's hard about these things, you just don't know when in the tournament. Is it the first fight? Is this the first time they're ever seeing them? Is this after the stealth fight? Is this after the Stegosaurus fight?
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, and that will factor in much more with Series 5.
Yeah. Alright, moving quickly along. Series 4.
Series 4, Hypnodisc, easily.
Hypnodisc easily. Yeah, no, there's no dispute. You saw how much damage Pussycat can cause, and I just think that's,
That is more potatoes compared to what Hypnodisc was dishing out in 99. It was 2000 by that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Razor died in Series 4 because of the reverberation of a Pussycat hit on the chassis. That's from a Pussycat hit. Look at a Hypnodisc hit.
Yeah.
It'll reverb the chassis to bits.
Yeah. Yeah, alright, well, that's easy then. Series 5, I have heard both ways. And this is the one where we almost got it. Like, we almost got it so many times. We almost got it in the All-Stars, the Extreme. We almost got it in Series 5 in the Grand Final. Like, they wanted it to happen. And they almost did have it happen, because the People's Challenge picked it to happen in Extreme, and then Hypnodisc and Razor are both just like, well, that would all be very fun, but, exhibition matches are for crap like TR2 and Behemoth, not for robots like us. And so they didn't do it.
Yeah, like they weren't going to have their robots get completely destroyed on account of a write-in vote in a magazine.
A bunch of 8-year-olds want you to destroy your robot and have to pay about £2,000 to rebuild them.
Yeah, in the middle of your Series 5 campaigns as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it comes very close to happening. I'll say, if these robots were completely fresh, it's Hypnodisc's fight to lose.
Yeah.
But at the standard that they were at in the episode, if Hypnodisc had lasted to that judge's decision and had then been given it, because it would have been given it, if it hadn't been pitted, it would have won that fight, because it had done so much damage, and damage was weighted. It didn't matter how aggressive and how controlling and how well driven Bigger Brother was. It was never going to be given that victory.
Series 10 rules, no Sharky sees Bigger Brother spinning with its flipper hanging on its side. Well, they were more aggressive, so
yeah. So that fight would have happened if not for that miraculous pitting, but in that context, given the state that we see Hypnodisc in during its Firestorm battle, I do think Razor would have won in that specific context.
Yeah, I'd give it. Yeah, Razor. I think Razor can. I think it might be a judge's decision, because Hypno can still. Hypno is down, but it's not out. It can still do some damage, but I don't think it's gonna kill Razor, which it need to.
See, I think I basically take this view on it, which is I think Hypnodisc would win it if Hypnodisc got the right hit. Hypnodisc would win, and it would just be them from then on. But if Simon and Ian got one bite down on Hypnodisc, they would never let it go. They're just like, we're not.
Oh no!
So if it was that, like you said, it's the first. Who's the first hit? And first hit, I reckon, would be if Razor got the first hit. And this is my answer for Series 6 as well, by the way. So I'm not going to repeat it. By Series 5, 6. Hypnodisc has got the raw power in 5, but I don't think they can pull it off. In Series 5, 6, Razor driving. By now, they know Hypnodisc, and they're like, we're not taking any chances. They bite, pit release, pit. And that is, my last point will be, that is the reason why I'm glad we never got this fight, because I reckon it would have been really, really cynical.
Yes, this fight is a lot better in your head than it could ever be on the TV. Like, because you in your in specifically in the head of your 5-year-old self, because
10. Come on.
no, hey, no, I was 4 or 5 when this was on the telly. But in this context, you've played this fight out with the pullbacks, or in my case, with the razor pullback and the Hypnodisc pit stop. Like, or with the mini bots, or like just like even just like writing it in a fantasy tournament, and like it's this war between two absolute legends of the sport, and they're taking all these hits from each other and all that, and that's not what would have happened. Neither of them had great armor. Both of them were really well driven, and both of them would have at that juncture been fighting for victory more than entertainment. It would have either been a one-hit kill where Hypnodisc's first hit just disabled Razor's drive and warped its chassis like Pussycat did in Extreme 1, or it would have been a protracted, but ultimately the fight ends on the first hit when Razor gets its claw through Hypnodisc's side, just slams it into a wall, but pushes it into the pit release button, and then just lets it go. It wouldn't have been exciting. And it is far better imagined than it ever could be for real.
Yeah, and
Well-
the good thing about that is that you're right, it is better in your head because it can happen over and over and over again in your head, and you can never know which is the correct one. Whereas once you see a decision, like, people always say Panic Attack. Oh, let's see Panic Attack versus an All-Star. Well, I've seen Panic Attack versus Pussycat, and I'm actually, I know how that fight went, and it was boring as hell, and now I can never think about how it could possibly go. So,
Yeah. It's the clash that we never got, and the show is better that way.
Yeah.
Well, it's all well and fine. I would have liked to see it. I would have liked to see it specifically in Extreme 2, where it's not going to impact anything.
Gross.
With a working Hypnodisc, of course. As for the question of who would win in Series 6 and Extreme 2, I take the same stance as TG. It's Hypno's more likely to get those hits in. And yeah, it may be unreliable, but it's not as if Razor's got the armor to take advantage of that.
I take Razor's side slightly more due to the issues that Hypnodisc faced, but at the same time, placement in the tournament heavily important in this one, even more so arguably than Series 5, because like if it's Hypnodisc in round 1, that's going to be a very interesting fight. At least in terms of tactical driving, it's not going to be exciting to watch, but on a driving level, it will be fairly interesting.
Well, I mean, it can't take place later in the tournament because Razor's not ending up in the losers melee. So
No. All right, let's go, guys. We've got to wrap this up. We're taking way too long.
Okay.
What's your
one-
favorite fight of the last half of Hypnodisc's career?
Bigger Brother, duh.
Yeah. Okay. Excluding Bigger Brother.
Excluding Bigger Brother, okay. It's probably got to be probably Atomic.
Yeah, probably Atomic.
See, I want to say the first round of Series 6 just because I love that shot of, Barbarous has got the entanglement and Hypnodisc just like cuts it like it's a big pair of scissors. It just chops it off and kills Barbarous. And I do love some of the hits on Granny's Revenge, but I do also kind of want to say Atomic. But I think...
Yeah, I mean, if you take... Yeah. You're not quite as spoiled for choice in this one as you are in last episode.
Last episode we had tons of choices. And it's funny, both in pre and post Series 5, there's an obvious choice in Splinter and Hypnodisc.
Yeah. Okay, Big Brother fight versus Splinter fight. I got Splinter.
Oh yeah, that's a good choice. Well, Splinter because it's a win, whereas Bigger Brother's a loss. For
me, it's like, are you asking as a Hypnodisc fight or as a fight in general?
A
Because
Robot Wars fan or a Hypnodisc fan?
as a Hypnodisc fan, then yes, like a Hypnodisc fan that lets their biases get in the way, like I do with Razor, or just like a Hypnodisc fan that like recognizes the best fight. But I think the Bigger Brother fight's on a different level. Like it's the best fight of the show, and like it's the best fight of 10 regular series, 2 side series, and then like however many foreign series as well.
there's not many. There's like just build on what you're saying. There's not many fights where the loser is one of the most popular robots in the history of the show, and all of the people who consider that their favorite robot, including myself, still think it's the best fight. Like, how many Carbide fans, I wonder, think the Series 10 Grand Final is the best ever? Well, maybe that's a bad example, but you see what I'm sort of saying. Sometimes your favorite robot losing can take the shine off a fight, but the Hypnodisc Bigger Brother one doesn't seem to have that effect at all.
So yeah, but as purely as a fan of Hypnodisc who just wants to see Hypnodisc do cool Hypnodisc things, the Splinter fight is the better if you want a Hypnodisc spectacle, a Hypnodisc showcase. But as a fight, the Bigger Brother one cannot be topped.
I get more out of Splinter, but it's a 9.5 versus a 9.4 out of 10.
Yeah,
That's fair.
You're quibbling at that point.
Yeah, you are.
One last note: Razor in Series 8 versus Hypnodisc. Razor wins.
No, Razor wins that one.
That's a terrible way. That is a terrible way to end this episode. I refuse to participate in that question.
Yeah, no, edit that. I would at this juncture I would normally say what's next on the list, but honestly there is no point. Like, I said it was going to be Hypnodisc next at the end of Shitbots, and it wasn't. It was fucking Robo Chicken.
Yeah. Don't try and predict what our plans are, guys. Just stay tuned and there'll be more episodes.
Yeah. Right. None of us can predict what people in the podcast chat will decide to record at any given moment. So
yeah,
whatever it'll be, I'm sure it'll be good. And
until
whatever it is,